Hi, I'm Marlene Rife Dandy. I was born in here in South Dakota, November 21st, 1935. My parents are Mildred Braverman Rife and Simon A. Rife. Um, Help.
How did you end up in Huron, South Dakota?
My father was working for a department store there, and actually, I only lived there for about 6 months of my life, so I remember very little. From there, we moved to Odo, Iowa. I lived there until I was about 4.5 or 5. Then we moved to Wagner, South Dakota. We used to make many trips to Sioux City, Iowa to visit my grandparents. My mother had a father and mother living at that time. My father only had his father. Uh,
What do you remember about your grandparents?
oh, my grandparents, Braverman, were very warm, loving people. We used to go and play in their front yard in Sioux City, Iowa. I had wonderful memories of my grandmother baking early in the morning. She just would have big Sunday dinners when all of the relatives would come to the house. And when I was 5, we were in Sioux City and I had my tonsils out there. And my grandmother became very ill, and I remember sleeping on the floor in her dining room, and we had to be very quiet because she had a heart condition, and so she never quite recovered from that, and by the time I was 7, she passed away. My mother and I would make many trips to Sioux City to see her prior to that time, but I didn't get to see her much because she was always lying down in her bedroom, and I just had to play quietly on the front porch. We would ride in from Wagner with the truckers that would make trips from Sioux City to Wagner, delivering bread and milk and things like that for our grocery store. After my grandmother died, my grandfather came to live with us in Wagner, and he was a real sweetheart, our Zadie Braverman. We used to get him into trouble because every time we did something naughty, Mother would question us and we'd say, "Oh, Zadie did that." And he would just laugh and take it with a grain of salt. Also, my other grandfather, Rife, came to live with us, and so we had quite a house full. My mother became pregnant with my younger sister, Francie, and she, I would say probably 4 or 5 months into the pregnancy, she became very ill, and she was confined to bed. And this was very traumatic for me because I deeply loved her, and she would go from our home to the hospital, and finally she and my father had to go to Rochester, and my 2 grandfathers took care of us.
What did your grandfather Braverman do for a living?
He owned, I understand, before I was born, in the early years in Sioux City, he had a root beer stand. And it was by Riverside Park, which was an amusement park. And then he opened a grocery store, and he and my grandmother operated the grocery store. She spoke very little English, and his was, of course, very broken English. But she remembered everything. She used to do all the math in her head, and then she would talk to him in Yiddish and translate so that he could keep the books and take care of the business. It sounded to me as though she was kind of a brain in the operation, and he was more the front man.
Did your mother have any siblings?
Yes, my mother had two older brothers, an older sister, and a younger brother. The oldest brother died of pneumonia at age 13. The three older children were born in Russia, but my mother and her younger brother were born in Syracuse, New York. And from there, I don't know how or why they came to Sioux City, but that's where they lived and where she met my father.
Did you stay in contact with these uncles? And
Oh yes, they were very important in my life, even though they lived all over the country. They were very close with my mother, and like Thanksgiving, they would all come from wherever to our house, and always once in the summer we would have a family reunion. And I can remember all the kids had to sleep on the floor downstairs in the living room because we only had a 3-bedroom house, and the adults got the upstairs rooms. But it was a wonderful time because they were always kidding my father, and we would have family sings, and they would tell him not to sing because they didn't feel his voice was as good as theirs. And we just had wonderful times.
do you have a lot of cousins?
Actually, not. I have 5 boy cousins and 1 girl cousin. But we are close, and we have had one family reunion of just the cousins, and November 12th of 2008 marked the 100th year that my Bubby Braverman and the 3 older Braverman children arrived on these shores. My grandfather was already here, and we were going to have a family cousin reunion at that time, but we didn't make it. So anyway, we did all call each other and keep in contact to mark that special day.
Where were the Bravermans from?
Oh, I don't know. I think it was Poland, but I don't remember ever hearing the name of the town.
What brought them to this part of the country?
That I don't know. I know my grandfather had cousins and I think brother and 2 sisters in Rochester, New York. And so when he came to this country, he went there. But then when he was able to bring his wife and the 3 older children, somehow they settled in Syracuse, New York. I remember my mother telling stories of riding on a cart, a horse-driven cart with her father delivering milk or things like that. And but how they came to Sioux City, I don't know, or why, because my grandmother did have 3 sisters in Sioux City, and maybe that's what brought them there.
Don?
Hi, my name is Donald Dandy. I was born November 6, 1935. Regarding my parents, my father,
In Omaha.
thank you, in Omaha, Nebraska. My father came to this country in 1900 at the age, My father came to this country when he was 13 years old by himself. So that would have been in 1913. He was born in 1900. And evidently he had some relatives in Omaha, so that's how he wound up in Omaha. And I think when he got here, he did numerous types of jobs. I remember he was telling me that I think when he was about 18, he was a window washer. He used to do some window washing on high-rise buildings at that time. I don't know how tall the buildings were, but that was one of his jobs. And he also, back I think in his 20s, worked for the Wardrobe Clothing Company. At that time, I don't know if that was owned by the Mo Linsman or who owned it, but he he was a haberdasher for a while, and then he, of course, met my mother, and eventually went to work in my grandmother's grocery store, which was located on 20th and California Street. My mother was born in Omaha, Nebraska in 1906 or 7. Went to school here in Omaha and then went to Tech High School. Okay. We lived with my grandmother, I remember very well, when I was a young boy. There were 3 boys in our family. We lived behind the grocery store. It was a big house with 5 or 6 bedrooms and only 1 bathroom on the 2nd floor back in the corner. And that used to be a fight to get to the bathroom. My grandmother had a pretty tough life. When her daughters were quite young, maybe in their early teens, her husband went to New York City to visit a sister, and he unfortunately was killed there. He was hit by a truck, and so my grandmother had the job of raising her 3 daughters and operating her grocery store by herself. And then, of course, my mother, who was the oldest daughter, was married to my father. Then he came into the grocery store. So my grandmother was really kind of a character. She had a hard life, and she would do some unusual things. If someone came in the grocery store and stole something, she'd chase them down the street screaming and hollering at him with a broom. And that happened several times. Trying to remember other things about my grandmother. She certainly did take good care of us. She used to do a lot of most of the cooking, actually. When I was quite young, I attended Central Grade School, and at that time we had a live-in lady who used to help out in the house and so forth. But my grandmother really took care of the household things. My mother, of course, worked in the store with my father. Our store was on 20th and California Street, and then eventually we also had a store, I think it was in the late 40s, they had another store on 25th and Capitol Avenue. It was a grocery store and a liquor store. My father and my uncle were business partners in that store, and then eventually, of course, they were business partners in the store on 20th and California. My older brother Howard worked in the store on 20th and California and managed that store until 1950 or 1951 when it was sold to the Epson Lithographing Company. I worked in the store as a young kid, and then of course I worked in the store on 25th and Capitol. I would go to attend Central Grade School and go to the store after I got out of grade school and do different things. And as I got older and attained a driver's license, it was fun to deliver groceries to customers because I got to drive the vehicle and always had a good time doing that. I attended Central High School, and in my freshman or sophomore year I met Marlene, and we became very attached, and eventually went with Marlene all through high school and college, and we were married at a very young age, 20.
Let's go back and talk about, you said your mother had 2 sisters. Who were they?
My mother's 2 sisters were Bess and Minnie. Minnie was the second oldest sister. She married Simon Green. They also had 3 children, and he originally, to the best of my recollection, owned a vegetable store, actually, on 16th between Burt and Webster, and it was a produce store. And that was always kind of exciting because when we went to his produce store, I remember as 8, 9 years old, there was a barbecue place on the corner of 16th and Burt Street.
That figures.
And a fellow by the name of Epstein owned it. I think his son's name was Art Epstein. And I used to always love to have barbecued ribs from Art Epstein's place. And across the street was the Omaha Potato Market, and then there was Powell's Grocery Store, and then there was a shoemaker and a barber shop there. And of course, I used to have my hair cut there. In fact, I remember the barber's name was Jerry, and the shoemaker's name was Bernstein, his last name. And I only had one pair of shoes, so every couple of months I was getting new soles and heels put on my shoes. I don't know why my parents never bought me another pair of shoes. Damn it. Those were some of the
What
early
about
years in my life.
Your Aunt Bess.
My who?
Aunt Bess?
Oh, my Aunt Bess, I'm sorry. Yes, my Aunt Bess, she met my Uncle Harry Weinberg was from Chicago. And I don't know what brought him to Omaha, but they met at a park, was it called the Riverview Park? It was in Benson, and they used to have dances there and things of that nature. And they met there, and eventually, of course, they married and moved to Chicago. He worked at that time for Sears and Roebuck in Chicago, and they had 3 children. They eventually moved to Omaha in the early 50s, I believe, and he opened a automobile paint store called Wayne Auto Body and Paint. That was his background. My father passed away in 1951, and at that time, my mother, of course, was in the store on 25th in California. She more or less operated the liquor store. My brother Howard
Was
worked.
Capital.
It was on 25th and Capitol, thank you. My brother Howard worked in the store, and again, I still worked in that store until I graduated high school, and of course then went off to college.
Tell me about your brothers.
My brothers, I had a brother Howard, the older brother, who was born in 1927. He had also, we both attended Central Grade School, and he went on to attend Central High School, and then I think he went to Omaha University for a year or two, if I remember correctly. He was a very loving guy. I think he had a lot of friends, and everyone, got along with him very, very well, and he was a great guy. My younger brother Gene was born in 1941. 1941, right during the war. I remember I was 6 or 7 years old, and I remember my mother bringing him home from the hospital. I remember being out in front of the house when she actually brought my brother Gene home.
Didn't your dad have his first heart attack at that time?
Well, he had his first heart attack when he was 37, and I think after that, he had a couple of more heart attacks. I remember at our home one evening when he had a heart attack, and unfortunately we didn't know what to do. And I always remember him sitting in a chair, and he was in a lot of pain.
Wow.
I wished I was smart enough at the time to give him an aspirin, because that certainly would have helped him. But after that, he went to the hospital and passed away in the hospital. My father used to try and get away from the store. Every year he would go to a place called South Haven, Michigan. It was a kosher resort about 130 miles outside of Chicago, located right on Lake Michigan. And it was strictly 100% kosher. And of course, all the people there, most of them were out of Chicago or Wisconsin. And I was fortunate enough to go. He took me 2 or 3 times, and we'd stay for 2 or 3 weeks. And it was always a great time going to the Lake Michigan every day for swimming, and of course the food was always very, very delicious. My father enjoyed that very much, and unfortunately my mother had to stay at home and took care of the business. But evidently she agreed to do it, and everything worked out swell. But I remember once I went there by myself. Actually, he was there already, and I took a train to Chicago, and then I took a Greyhound bus to South Haven. I think at that time I was either 11 or 12, and that was quite an experience for me. And also I remember one time I didn't go, but I think my father went there and he got a ride. There was a customer in the store. It was an over-the-road driver, and he went to Chicago in a semi-trailer truck. And then, of course, my aunt and uncle, Bess Weinberg and Harry, lived there, so of course he would stay with them for a couple of days, and then go up to South Haven. I do remember. I have a picture of my father. Evidently, they went out one evening in Chicago, Harry and Bess, and they went to I believe it was the Shapery in Chicago. They must have been celebrating something. I don't know what it was. But I also remember I must have been like 8 years old the first trip there, and I used to have a terrible habit of sucking my finger. And I was 8 years old already. But I remember I was getting out of my uncle's car, and we were going out to dinner that evening, and we were in front of the restaurant, and I was getting out of the car, and I had my finger in my mouth. And he gave me a clop across the mouth, and I bit the hell out of my finger. And I cried like a baby, but I never ever sucked that finger again. That's a true story.
Yeah. Your dad he was really religious.
My father, my father would,
would
light to fill in every morning.
Walk to the synagogue.
Always walk to the synagogue. Wouldn't light a stove or a switch. On Saturday, I was the Shabbos goy, before I was bar mitzvahed. But I remember going to the synagogue on 18th in Chicago quite often. Of course, during the holidays, my father our grocery store was closed on Saturday, so he was always in the synagogue. And I remember several times, I might have been 8 or 9 years old, that we'd get a call at home that they didn't have any whiskey at the synagogue, and I used to have to grab a bottle of whiskey out of the closet and run down to the synagogue with a bottle of whiskey on a Saturday morning.
Oh.
Which that happened several times.
Marlene, I want you to tell me about your sisters.
Oh, I had an older sister, Barbara. She was born December 31st, 1932. And my younger sister, Francie, was born March 27th, 1944. I kind of resented my sister Francie coming on the scene. I'd been the baby for almost 8 years before she appeared. But not only that, because my mother was so ill that whole pregnancy, and shortly before Francie was born, she was bedridden, and I used to get to go into her bedroom and eat dinner with her. And I was coming down the hall, and I heard her say to my father, "I don't care whether I live anymore." And I thought, at 8 years old, I thought it's all because of this baby. She was never sick beforehand, and I thought, I don't care what she's like, I'm going to hate her. And but fortunately, my mother went to Sioux City for the delivery, and she had to be there at least 6 weeks, and we did not bring Francie home from Sioux City until she was 3 months old, because my mother was too ill to take care of her. So, it was hard for me to understand what all this illness was about, and all I knew was that the one person I cared so deeply for was so ill. And but of course, Francie and I got over that, or I got over that with Francie, and we have a great relationship.
When did you move to Omaha?
We moved to Omaha in 1945, I think it was, June of 45. My father had tried to enlist in the Army, and they wouldn't take him because he was supporting two grandfathers, and my mother had been ill. So he had sold everything off, and he was supposed to report here in Omaha, and he chose Omaha because he had a sister living here, and he thought that if they sent him overseas, at least my mother would be close to a relative. But like I say, after reviewing his case, they wouldn't take him, so he went to the Martin Balmer plant, and that's where he worked as like a night manager for, I don't know, 5 or 6 months, and then the war was over. So.
What are your memories of coming back to, or moving to Omaha?
Oh, I just, coming from a small town, a school that I attended there went from first grade through high school. Omaha was just like the biggest city I'd ever seen. I mean, it had streetcars and, you know, it overwhelmed me at 8 years of age. It was beyond my comprehension. But my one grandfather, my mother's father, moved with us, and he always brought a lot of stability with him. He was just very loving when it came to the children, us. And even though my mother was still not well, he kind of held the household together.
Where did you go to elementary school here in Omaha?
I attended Washington grade school on 56th and Mayberry. I was in the 5th grade when we moved, so I went from 5th through 8th grade there.
And when in your freshman year did you meet Don?
Actually, I met him the summer between our freshman and sophomore year. And I mean, I was only 13 when I started high school, and I mean, terribly shy, and I just, I wouldn't have made it, I don't think, if I didn't have an older sister who, you know, had attended a couple of years there and was there with me. But again, my freshman year of high school, my mother was ill, and my sister Barbara and I had to take turns staying home, so I missed almost half of my second semester of my freshman year. And that was, you know, that was hard. I mean, I did fairly well in school with the exception of algebra, and I think it was out of the goodness of the teacher's heart that they passed me that second semester. But, and I was just, like I say, so shy. I mean, I could hardly stand, you know, see any seniors or something coming toward me. I was just like, oh, God, don't pick on me. But
we talked a little bit about your grandfather, your mother's father. Mm-hmm. How about your father's father?
He was very different. He was extremely religious. He not only laid tefillin every day, but if on Passover, we had to go through each and every word of the entire book, and so as a child I remember sitting there until like midnight falling asleep at the table while he conducted the service. To get himself ready for Passover, he would hold a hot coal near his mouth so that he could kosher himself. He was a little extreme for me.
And he came to Omaha with you?
Yes, but he would spend half the time at his daughter's house, my father's sister, and the other half he would come and live with us. So, and then I guess he eventually spent most of his time at the daughter's house. They only lived 2 blocks from us, so they had the extra bedroom, and we had my mother's father with us. So it just kind of worked out that he would stay there.
What was her name?
My Aunt Rose.
Yes.
Yeah, my father's sister was Rose Cone. And she and her husband George had 1 daughter, and that's my only female cousin. Her name is Eden.
Do you have any idea where your grandparents came from?
I honestly I know they came from somewhere in Russia. It's the old story, Minsk or Pinsk or what have you, and I don't remember, I don't have any information as, even when my grandmother came to this country. When she came here, she had a sister, and her mother also was here. And I don't know if her father came to this country or not. I don't have that information. But I remember, yes, I remember seeing pictures of my great-great-grandmother, my grandmother's grandmother, and she had the two daughters, my grandmother and Aunt Esther, and she married Joe White. And that was a large family here in Omaha.
This was your grandmother's sister?
My grandmother's sister was Esther White, right, and they had a very large 6 or 7 children in their family. And my grandmother's mother lived with my grandmother, and at the time when she was alive. I think I was already, I wasn't born. She might have died before I was born. So I really don't have much information. And my grandmother never really talked about it much, and I, of course, was too young to really inquire about different things as to her, childhood and livelihood and so forth. So I know that the family, my grandmother and possibly her mother and husband owned a restaurant on South 13th Street at one time, back in the early 1900s. And how they got into the grocery business, I have no idea, and exactly when. But living with my grandmother, we had a lot of experiences. As I said, she lost her husband when she was a young woman, and she had a pretty tough life, but she grew up in the old school, and there's a jillion stories regarding my grandmother. She was a tough woman, but she was a lovely woman, actually. I'm sure she had a big heart, because there were people in the neighborhood that she would take care of, and I remember even in the grocery store at times people would come in, and if they couldn't afford to pay for something today, they'd pay for it next week, and they'd write it up in these little books, and they had a big credit business at the time. But my grandmother, there's a lot of stories. One story I can tell you, which is very comical. My brother Howard and I were going to the movies, and we decided we're going to the Circle Theater on 33rd and California Street. And evidently, my grandmother heard us talking, and so we got in the car. It was night. It was already dark. It was in the wintertime. We got in the car, didn't pay any attention. He was driving. I was in the front seat, and we drove to the Circle Theater, and we opened it, parked the car, and we got out, getting out of the car, and lo and behold, my grandmother is hiding in the back seat of the car, which we had no idea that she was in the back of the car. She was like, hiding on the floor. And
she was a little woman.
So I don't think she'd ever been to a movie before. So Cyrano de Bergerac was playing. It was called Cyrano de Bergerac. I can't remember who played the actor.
Jose Ferrer.
Jose Ferrer, right. So anyway, we go into the theater, we paid her way in, and she sat down. As you first walk into the theater, she sat down, and we went down the middle and sat. We watched the movie, and we come out of the movie, and she says, "Was that actor was Jewish?" And we said, "We don't know. Why do you say that?" She says, "Because he had a big nose." Referring to Cyrano de Bergerac.
She loved the movie because it was
she thought he was a Jewish person in the movie, but that was just one of the experiences.
Did she ever go to another movie with you?
No, she never attended another movie with us. I really don't remember my grandmother really going out at all. I don't. We lived not that far from the synagogue, and I don't remember her going to the synagogue even at the time. She was a homebody.
She used to run around in Howard's bedrooms for
Well, yeah, she wore,
They were
what do
so
you call them,
big.
army boots? Or
Yeah.
Yeah, she wore hand-me-down shoes.
Yeah, she was a
She,
character.
I guess she did, actually, she did go out a few times, I don't recollect, because she did have a pair of black low-heeled lace shoes that
Oh,
she
really?
wore.
I never saw them
Yeah,
on her.
that she actually did wear, but normally, just during the course of the day, she'd wear an old pair of shoes that Howard used to have, or an old pair of my shoes.
Right.
And they had to be wides, but she had wide feet.
What neighborhood did you grow up in?
I grew up in around the Creighton University on 22nd and 21st and California Street. It was a very, very, at that time, it was really a very good neighborhood. A very Catholic neighborhood because of Creighton University, and the church was there. It used to be constantly, priest would be walking up and down from Creighton going downtown, and they would, during a nice day, a lot of nuns and so forth. And most of the kids in the neighborhood I, of course, ran around with were all Gentile kids. My only association at that time with anything Jewish is that when I went to Central Grade School, there were one or other two Jewish kids there, older than myself, but I used to go to the Jewish Community Center quite a bit because it was only 2 blocks from grade school, and of course I attended Talmud Torah there for a short period of time, and I also used to go there and swim, and a fellow named Manny Segal was a swimming instructor. And I always remember I did not know how to swim. I must have been 7 or 8 years old. And he told me one day, he says, "I'm going to teach you how to swim, Dandy." I said, "Oh, thank you." And he pushed me into the pool. And you know something? I learned how to swim quickly. But I used to spend, of course, in grade school, spent a lot of time, not a lot of time at Jewish Community Center besides Talmud Torah and swimming. But I do remember one embarrassing situation. I was going to a Hebrew school there, so I think I was 11, maybe 12 years old. Yes, I was 12 because I was kind of preparing for my bat mitzvah. And after school let out, especially at Central, there used to be an ice cream guy on 20th and Dodge. He had a pull up there and he'd sell ice cream out of a little white box with hot ice in it. And occasionally I'd buy an ice cream bar. I think they were a nickel or a dime. So one day he says to me, he says, "If you pass out these leaflets, I'll give you a free ice cream bar." Because my Hebrew class started at 3:45, whatever it was, and it was 3:15, and all the high school kids were coming out. And he says, "You just pass one of those leaflets out to everyone coming out of school." And I said, "Okay, fine." So I'm passing them out. And about 15 minutes later, across the street, there's some of my Talmud Torah friends are in the window, and they open the window up and they're hollering at me. They start calling me Goy. "Hey, Goy, you are a Goy." And I didn't know what it was all about. Anyway, after I got through passing out these leaflets, I got my ice cream bar, and I went into the Jewish Community Center to my class, and I think it was the teacher, Mr. Wolfson, asked me why I was passing out those leaflets or circulars. I said, "Because the fellow gave me a free ice cream bar." So I opened up, he had one of the leaflets there, and he opened it up, and they were talking about Jesus, and it was a very religious thing about Christianity and so forth. And I unfortunately didn't really know anything about that. I didn't read it. But that was kind of an experience. But I was an entrepreneur. I got a free ice cream bar.
Let's go back, Marlene. Tell me about your mom.
Oh, she was a very sweet lady, very beautiful lady. She had a heart of gold. I think she was always felt her education. She only went to the 8th grade, and because they were so poor, all the kids had to go to work afterwards. So she always felt that she wasn't quite as smart as the next guy, and she was very well read. I mean, she had not an extended formal education, but she made the most of what she did have, and she's, in my opinion, she never should have felt that way because she really more or less self-educated herself. And like I say, she had a heart of gold. She was just, well, I worshipped her. I always told her. First, I was never going to get married, but then I decided if I did, I was going to buy the house right next door so that I didn't have to leave. And like I say, she really was a beautiful woman. She had striking silver hair that she wore up in a bun, and she wore beautiful blue eye makeup, and you could spot her if there was 100 people in the room. She just stood out.
Do you remember in particular any meals at home for holidays and so on?
Oh yeah, she was, well, when I was little we kept kosher until we moved to Omaha. So even living in small towns like Odo, Iowa and Wagner, South Dakota, we had all our food shipped in, the meat from Sioux City, the bread, the milk, and so on. And my mother could turn out the best food in a small area. We had a very tiny kitchen in Omaha, and you could stand in the middle and touch the cupboards and the stove and the refrigerator. You didn't have to move a step. But she could stand there and fry chicken for 20 people and bake an apple pie like, I mean, her apple pie in the family was world famous. Everybody had to have Auntie Mildred's apple pie. And we always, for all the holidays, I mean, they were the traditional Jewish holiday type food. She used to overcook her meat, however, for normal times. But she was a good cook. She'd get so mad at Passover time because she'd make a banana cake and it would take 12 eggs and it would rise up in the oven, and she would take it out, and as she'd get ready to turn it over, it would out of the pan, and she'd make another one. And I never heard my mother swear except at Passover time when the damn banana cake would fall out of the pan. Our daughter Stacy used to go over there and get all the dishes out of the cupboard for her because it was harder for her to bend down at that time. And she really, I mean, she was a fairly young woman. She was in her 50s, you know, but it seemed like they aged earlier in those days than we do today. I don't know, maybe it's because we've exercised or pay a little more attention to that. But anyway, those are some of Stacy's favorite memories, was to go and help her Grammy at Passover time. She loved the holiday.
And how about your father?
Oh, my father. Well, he worked all the hours. The job for raising the 3 girls were left to my mother because he had to make a living for not only our family but the 2 grandfathers. He more or less supported them, and we would see him. He would drive us to school in the morning, and then of course we didn't see him until nighttime. And Mother was a disciplinarian, so if we wanted to kind of get away with something, we would go to Daddy first, and then if we could win him over until they caught on to us, it was whatever your mother said after that. But he was kind of a soft touch. Mother was not a soft touch.
And Don, tell me about your mother.
Well, my mother was a very, very lovely lady. Again, I think that she was the oldest of the 3 sisters. So probably when she was a young woman, I imagine a lot of the responsibility was put on her shoulders, actually, with the other 2 girls. But actually, I remember very well when I was in school, certainly grade school, I always remember my early years a few times, my mother, taking me to school. Uh, I used to, we used to, probably when I was maybe 7 or 8 years old, my mother would take me to the Muse Theater, which was on 24th and Farnham. And it was quite a walk. We would walk from the 22nd California Street and walk up to the Muse Theater. And I don't know, my brother Gene at that time he was just evidently too small. And Howard, of course, was already much older. But I remember things like that. A lot of the family mills were always too well organized because they had the grocery store. So if my father was working, he would, especially when we moved from 21st in California, we moved to 22nd, a block up the street, to a duplex. And if my father came home from the store, it was a rarity to have a meal, actually, a family meal. Maybe only on a weekend, or of course a Saturday Shabbos meal at noon was after the synagogue. We'd always have a Saturday Shabbos meal, of course, with a soup, and something I hated very much was boiled chicken. I always remember eating boiled chicken. And I think about it today, and I don't think I could handle it. But the memories of my mother, she was a very loving person. Unfortunately, she was a very easy kind of a person, never really raised her voice or really reprimanded the kids. Maybe she probably should have, because we probably deserved it. My father was a very loving person. Until this day, I run into people who certainly remember my father and knew him, and they always comment about what a sweetheart kind of a person he was. Fortunately, I guess I've never heard anyone say anything really bad about him over the years. But he was a hard-working person. Constantly working in the grocery store. They'd open up at 8 o'clock in the morning and close at 10 o'clock, and so it was pretty tough life. When we were kids, we never owned a car, so we never really went anywhere, so to speak. I think when we finally had an automobile in the house, it was my brother Howard bought a car. I think he was 19 or 20 years old at the time. And that's the first car we had in the family, so we always had to rely on other family members or friends if we were going to go anywhere. I do remember as a young kid, 8 or 9 years old, we had a neighbor across the street, and he used to raise chickens in his backyard, and it was a big thrill. About once a month he would drive way out in West Dodge Road somewhere, maybe it was Elkhorn at the time, to a sand pit. He would have a trailer on the back of his car, and we would ride in that trailer all the way out to the sand pit, in the empty trailer. In the back of the trailer, which was extremely dangerous, going out on West Dodge Road, and we'd load up that trailer with sand and gravel, and then coming back, we'd get on top of the gravel on the trailer and ride all the way back into Omaha. And that was always a big thrill. We used to always look forward to doing that. Thinking also, speaking of trailers and raising chickens, I remember we had in our backyard, my grandmother's house, we built a big, huge cage, and we had pigeons. We used to raise pigeons. I don't know if we raised them, we just would buy them and keep them in there. And probably myself and a couple of kids in the neighborhood, we had about, 25 pigeons. And this was over a period of maybe a year and a half. And I remember I must have been in the 7th grade, and I came home one day from school, and I go out in the backyard, and the pigeon cage is empty. And I said, what happened to the pigeons? I ran in the house, and I said, what happened to the pigeons? And that about 5:30 or 6 o'clock, my uncle came over to the house, and I discovered that we were having pigeons for dinner. He took all the pigeons, to the Shoika on North 24th Street and had them all killed, koshered, and they cooked pigeons, my pigeons, for dinner. And I was sick, heartbroken. I could not eat anything. That was one of my unforgettable tragedy experiences of my childhood. As I said before, I used to go to Michigan with my father during the summers for a couple of weeks, which was always a fun thing to do. I think my younger brother, Gene, went once or twice. So that was always something to look forward to. And of course, when I was a kid, I used to hang around the store a lot in my, 7, 8, 9 years old, 10 years old. As I got into high school, I used to live at the Jewish Community Center. I used to go there after school from Central High. We'd walk across the street and spend a couple hours at the J, and then go home for dinner, and usually came back at night. There was always a big group of fellas, and we used to work out or play basketball, and always have a great time. I have a lot of very fond memories of the Jewish Community Center in those early years. And as I think back about it, when I must have been I was a freshman, a sophomore at the time. That's during the Korean War, and a lot of the older fellows went off to the war at that time. And of course, I didn't know didn't follow the war, and didn't really know too much about it. And of course, it's always interesting now to talk to some of the guys about their experiences during the Korean conflict and so forth.
Well, let's go back and talk about, you met in your freshman year in high school.
I want to talk a couple things about my father
Go
that
ahead.
I want my children know, but I want my grandchildren to know. When my father went to college, he went to the University of Iowa, and it was the late 1929, perhaps 1930, and things were economically very rough. So in order to make money, he started to box. And of course, he didn't tell his parents that he was doing this, and he changed his name to Johnny Shea. That was the name he used as a boxer. And he made extra money this way. He was studying to be a dentist. However, when the crash came in '29, he had to leave school. So I believe he had maybe 1 year left of dentistry or so on, but anyway, he had to come home. He had lost his mother. She also died that year, and so he had to come home and help his father, and he had to take on the role of being a closer brother to his sister, because she took the mother's death very hard. And the father was working at, I think it was Martin or Davidson's department store. Anyway, he was needed at home. But so he had to put an end to his dental career, which he dearly loved. He was also an artist. He had the ability to draw. At one point in his life, must have been early 40s, there was some kind of a contest, and he entered it from Walt Disney, and he got a response that they would like him to come out to California to draw for them, but of course he had too many other responsibilities, and he didn't feel he could make enough money to do this, so he turned them down. But he really was, he could freehand do calligraphy. He had this knack. Unfortunately, it did not pass to one of his 3 daughters, but it did find a home in both grandchildren, Stacy and Jay. And he also invented a turn signal for the automobile, and while he was trying to get a patent for it with the government, someone stole the patent and claimed it as their own. But he had In fact, we still have the papers of this turn signal for automobiles. I don't think there was anything else that I feel that the children might need a reminder of.
Well, let's talk then about after you met each other in high school.
Marlene, why don't you start?
Are we going to get two versions?
Yes, probably. The first time I met him, I couldn't stand him, but I think that's the case that happens most times. Actually, we used to go out in groups in that time, and more so than just one-on-one dating. So, I thought he was very nice, but he just didn't have it.
I was 13, 14.
I know.
What do you
Me
want?
too. I'm sorry. So, but my first date, when you called and I finally said, okay, I'd go with you, we went to the movies. And it was the Paramount.
I don't remember.
And we double dated with Marilyn Plotkin and Sid Dunitz. Because neither one, you couldn't drive. And I can't remember the name of the movie, but it was Red Skelton.
Oh, is that the movie? Then we went to Trentino's.
Yes, we went to Trentino's.
I do remember that.
And what a high roller. He ordered a T-bone steak. Here it is 10 or 11 o'clock at night, and he orders a T-bone steak for $2.50. And that was a whole big lot of money in those days. And I thought, I'm sure he's just trying to impress me. That's before I knew how much you like to eat. And I was always told you order the cheapest thing on the menu because you don't want to take advantage of your date. So I probably ordered a hamburger.
We should have shared the T-bone.
We should have. I don't think you'd share it today.
And this went on until when?
Well, we
This dating.
Yes, we dated all through high school. Actually, we were a couple. Actually, yeah, starting our sophomore, end of our sophomore year, I think. Mm-hmm. Yes, I think it was end of our sophomore year, junior, senior year. We were a couple in high school. And even then, of course, I went to college, and down in Lincoln, and you stayed here the first semester. Then you came down to Lincoln, and we were there for a couple of years together in college.
But I came down in January,
Right.
and I think it was April or May, you told me that you felt you wanted to date other girls, that you hadn't had this opportunity or so on.
I don't remember that.
I do. So I said, okay. And so I was heartbroken. I figured, oh well. So anyway, I went out with Judd Rochman. He took me to a movie at the State Theater. And you were there with, I don't remember who. But anyway, the next day you called and asked if you could take me to lunch, and you'd even take my sister Francie.
Where'd we go?
We went to, it was, where Tyner's was? There was a really nice
In the
restaurant.
Mediterranean?
That's it.
Oh, funny, I
And-
should remember.
Funny you should. Anyway, so we went and had lunch, and I was very cool to you, but after that, I think from then on, we never broke up. Okay, so then we went on to, I guess it was our final year at college, down
Yeah,
in Lincoln.
right. Mhm.
You weren't going to stay in school or something. You went, you were helping me pay my tuition. My parents had said to me, we'll send you any place you want to go, but if you go down to Lincoln with him, you'll have to pay your own way. So I said, okay. So I was working and going to school, you were working and going to school, and then finally you stopped going to school and you started working a couple of jobs.
Right, and that's when your dad came down to Lincoln and called me and said he wanted to talk to me. He says, you want to take me for a ride? And I said, you drove all the way down here? He said, yes. So we went for a ride, and he said to me while we're driving, he said, Don, he says, what are your intentions toward my daughter? And I was speechless. I didn't know what to say. And I knew he used to be a boxer.
Very
so
good one.
I thought, well, I said, hopefully, I said, we're, madly in love with each other, and hopefully we'll be married someday. And we went, that was the conversation, and I don't even think the guy bought me breakfast or anything at the time, to be very honest with you. I just
not.
remember, so what are your intentions toward my daughter? And he was, very forthright about it.
That had to shake you up.
It shook me up. And anyway, I think at that time, probably, that was, might have been in May or so forth, and we were married that.
Oh, wait a minute. I think we should, after all this time, interject this.
No, I don't think we should. But I think that
I think we
were
should.
married in that August.
Well, I know, but that
That's
May,
That's fine.
oh, come on. We'll be long gone before anybody.
That's fine. We were married in August.
Well, you,
Just forget about it.
okay, let's say it was like over Memorial Day weekend. We came to Omaha, and we were going out to dinner. I think your mom was in the car, and my folks, and you and I, and we were going to Council Bluffs, and you asked my father for my hand in marriage.
I did?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, no, honestly, I don't remember that.
That you did. You were a gentleman.
Ask your father?
Yes, and you did it as long as everybody was in the car, so that they would all know at the same time.
I see, okay.
And so then we set the date, August 12th, 1956.
Very nice, okay.
What do you remember of the wedding?
I remember my mother standing with Dude and I, and it was almost his turn to go down, and she said to him, you can back out, you still can back out. And you said,
And she shoved me down the aisle.
oh, she did
Yes,
not.
don't you remember? I started to say something, she pushed me down,
And you
down the aisle.
You
'Cause
went
we were-
down the aisle waving to
Right,
everybody.
that's true. We were very young. We were only 20 years old.
I know.
So we were just little pishers.
Well, we thought we knew it all.
Right.
And then after the ceremony, we had a reception at the fireside, and all the relatives had come in, and we went over to my Aunt Rose's house. Must have been like 6 or 7 o'clock for kind of just a family thing. And they said to me, about 8 or 9 o'clock, I think it's time for you guys to go. I started crying. And I think I cried halfway to Atlantic, Iowa. I didn't want to go.
Is that where you honeymooned at Atlantic, Iowa?
No, we were going to Chicago. And we stopped at
We
Atlantic, Iowa.
drove Howard's car? No, we took my dad's car.
I don't remember.
Yeah.
We drove to
We
Chicago.
could hardly rub 2 nickels together.
Right, and we
Who were your attendants? Do you remember?
We kept it very simple. I had my sister Barbara, and my sister Francie, and my cousin Eden.
those were your attendants?
Mm-hmm.
I think my brother Howard was my best man.
Well, he walked your mom down the aisle.
Eugene might have been my best man.
Yeah.
I think my brother Gene might have been my best man, and Howard walked my mother down the aisle. And,
Jerry Hoberman.
yeah, I can't remember who else was there.
Maybe my cousin Dick.
Jerry
Ranston.
Hoberman, and Dick Raskin. I don't, it's all written down in the book somewhere.
Yeah, it is. With the pictures, we should have
I
looked.
can't, right, I don't remember everyone that, anyway,
And it's been happily ever after.
oh, absolutely. There's been some few unhappy times, but mostly happily ever after.
In conclusion, I would like to say to my daughter Stacy and my son Jay, how very much I love you. I hope you both realize this. Perhaps you never will totally understand how important you've been to my life, how very much you have given me, and how very much you have taught me. The blessings in my life are, of course, my 4 grandchildren, You hold the key to the four chambers of my heart. Wyatt, I love your questions, your inquisitiveness, I love to talk with you, to banter back and forth. And most of all, I love the fact that you never get off the phone or leave me, that you don't say, I love you, Grammy. Rafer, you have such a twinkle and a sparkle about you. You're your own person. You never cease to amaze me with, you're full of ideas. You just kind of sparkle. Milo, you and I are MFDs. You are a challenge to me at times, but I love every minute of it. I love the games we play, the crawling on the floor, the fact I can still fit into your tent. I love the fact that you sleep in the hall, but occasionally you come down and nestled in our room with us. You are your own person. You are very bright, as all four of you are, in your own ways. I love you dearly. And Clara, you are, of course, the baby of the group. You are so artistic. I love that your music, the way you draw, the beautiful pictures you make me. You all four light up my life. I say to each and every one of you, I love you dearly, and I hope to have you close for many, many years. I'm so glad you came into Jay's life. You've given us 4 happy, happy grandchildren. You are such a good mother. I admire all the way you handle the situations and all your creativeness. I love you. Do.
I would like to say, in regard to this video, Stacy, that I'm sure there are many, many times I should have told you that I loved you very much, which I really do. I never took the time to tell you these things before. You're a great gal. You have a lot of potential, and I do love you very much. Jay, again, it's the same thing. Seems like I'm always busy doing something else, and again, I've never taken the time to tell you how I really feel about you. I do love you very, very much. You're a great guy. You've got a great family. You've done a wonderful job with your children.
True.
And they all love you very much. You're a great father. And as far as the children go, Wyatt, Rafer, Milo, Clara, you know, I love you all very, very much. You're great kids. You all going to have great futures ahead of you. You will work hard and study hard, and you'll be great citizens when you grow up. Melissa, you've done a great job with your children. I'm glad you're a member of the family. I want you to know that I love you very much, and keep working hard and take care of my grandchildren.
Be creative.
That's it.
Love ya.